You are now listening to Just Another Year Chicago with Nic Roti and Ryan Chapman. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Just Another Year Chicago, hosted by myself, Nic Roti, and with my co-host, Ryan Chapman, who unfortunately cannot be here today. But today, we're going to be talking about a massive Bears win over the Houston Texans, 36-7 at Soldier Field, led by another stellar game by Mitchell Trubisky. The Chicago Bears defense coming back and looking like themselves from earlier in the season, and David Montgomery, who has been unreal in the last 3 weeks. We're also today going to be talking about the Bulls as they had their first preseason game Friday night against the Houston Rockets, followed by the Chicago White Sox and the Chicago Cubs. A little bit about the Blackhawks and what we should expect for them out of their next upcoming season. And finally, all wrapped up by college hoops. Again, please make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay up to date on all content. And make sure to comment and stay interactive with us. We love to hear your guys' comments. And we love talking sports with everyone. So again, thank you everyone for the support. And today to kick off, the Chicago Bears ending their 6-game losing streak, 36-7 against Deshaun Watson and the Houston Texans. Now, the Texans have not been a stellar team this year. There was a lot of, drama going on, as we kind of mentioned in the last broadcast, where DeAndre Hopkins, who is one of the league's top receivers, wanted out of Houston, got traded to the Arizona Cardinals, who is, having a pretty stellar their year with, young and up-and-coming quarterback Kyler Murray. But also, the firing of their head coach and GM. And the Texans are a bit of a mess. But they got kind of hot out of nowhere. Deshaun Watson played stellar on Thanksgiving, so everyone was like, okay, the Texans are going to make a late push. They won their division the last 4 out of the last 5 years. So what was going to go on with the Texans? And the Bears fans did not know what to expect entering this game, especially coming off that devastating loss against the Detroit Lions, losing in the last 4 minutes and 31 seconds, where the Bears had a 99.1% chance of winning that game. So a lot to go over today, but to start off, the Bears beat the Texans, and that's huge, considering the fact that we needed a lot of help to keep our playoff hopes alive, and we got that help today. So to start off with talking about, the Chicago Bears game first before we get into playoff, thoughts, David Montgomery and Mitchell Trubisky, what a day for these two young guys. They totally led the offense, especially right out of the gate. The first offensive play of the game being an 80-yard touchdown run by David Montgomery to put the Bears up 7-0 early, which was, that kind of opened the door like, okay, are the Bears going to, make us feel good again? Is it going to be like a one-play deal like against the Packers where, they play strong and all of a sudden, the offense doesn't show up the rest of the game? That was not the case. The offense showed up, and David Montgomery had a huge game, racking up over 100 yards, receiving and running the ball, led with Mitchell Trubisky. So there was a lot of what-ifs around this game, and David Montgomery made it happen yet again. So, again, he started off strong. He had a couple runs that got pushed back a few yards, but then David Montgomery had over half a dozen runs for 10 yards or more today, which that's huge. You can't ask for that much more with broken tackles involved. So David Montgomery, I think, has been a great pickup from Iowa State University so far. He's really helped keep the Bears' hopes somewhat alive over the last 3 weeks. And what's crazy is that all this breakout over the last 3 weeks has come after he was on concussion protocol. Not a lot of people know this. David Montgomery suffered a concussion earlier in the year. He was out for a week against the Saints, which was a crucial game where if we would have had this play from him, the Bears might have actually won that game. But we did not have him. We lost the game 26-23 in overtime. And the offenses look completely different with him coming back. David Montgomery having a good run game makes it easier for Mitchell Trubisky to have a good passing game. It's a great 1-2 punch, and it's been working, considering the fact that Mitchell Trubisky has had 776 passing yards since coming back, with 7 touchdowns and only 2 interceptions, with a completion rate of 68.5%. So you can't ask for much better numbers than that over a 3-game period. He's not putting up 300, 400-yard games like, Patrick Mahomes or Deshaun Watson, who he was playing today on the other side of the ball. But Mitch is getting it done. Mitch is doing what he has to do in order to make things happen to keep this team in games now. Something that Nick Foles wasn't able to do, which was a big struggle for a while. Nick Foles walks into the Atlanta game, back in week 3, 11 weeks ago. And everyone was like, oh, man, Trubisky's going to blow his game. And then Nick Foles comes in and, saves the day. And everyone's like, this is our guy. This is our guy. Nick Foles obviously was not the guy. Mitchell Trubisky, works well with this offense, especially with the type of offensive line that we have. And the play of Nick Foles doesn't help that. Mitchell Trubisky, he's a stud. He's pretty boy assassin. He gets out there. He does what he has to do in order to win games, whether that be scrambling, whether that be, throwing it to the receiver that isn't supposed to be the intended receiver. And he's making plays for himself. He's making smart decisions. He looks sharper. So the Bears are in pretty good hands for the rest of the season with Mitchell Trubisky at quarterback. And that's something that we should be really excited about. He had 3 first-half touchdowns, kind of like mentioned earlier. He didn't have any in the second half, but it's, a lot of people, including myself, think that, we were already beating them 30-7. The game really wasn't respectful at that point. If the Bears would have kept piling it on, that's kind of just like, the Texans are already a weak team. Why do they need to do it? But overall, both young guys on the offense looked great. And you can't even deny the fact of how, all the targets were looking. Jimmy Graham had another touchdown today, which is great. Our nominee for Walter Payton Man of the Year for what he's done in the community, which is one of the most prestigious awards in the NFL amongst players from what they say, which besides obviously getting MVP or, most improved player, offensive player of the year. Overall, Jimmy Graham looked great. Allen Robinson looked fantastic. They were going to him a little bit deeper, kind of like what we were talking about last week. Give A-Rob the opportunity. And he surpassed 1,000 yards receiving this year, which, playing with 2 different quarterbacks is not an easy task. And he still has, 3 more games in order to, fulfill that. So to put more yardage on that. So Allen Robinson had another great game today. And then Darnell Mooney making plays. He had a touchdown today, which was fantastic. But he was also fighting for yards. He was making himself available for Mitchell Trubisky to throw to and make plays. So overall, the offense just looked fantastic. And then an honorable mention to Cordell Patterson just being the tough guy. I tweeted this earlier in the game, but Cordell Patterson, man, he just goes out there. He runs over people. He gets hit by, guys like J.J. Watt, Aaron Donald, and these other gigantic defensive players who are known for knocking guys out of seasons. And Cordell Patterson gets up and says, come on, give me some more. And it was great to hear Cordell Patterson say, how about them Bears after the game? I retweeted it, so head over to my Twitter at ChicagoNick to, kind of see how I reacted overall with the offense during the game. And then if you guys want to see Cordell Patterson or follow the Chicago Bears at Chicago Bears. Next up about the Chicago Bears today is that they got pressure on Deshaun Watson. And that was something that was really missing from, Chuck Pagano's defense. Chuck Pagano has played way too conservative this year. And we kind of talked about it because he wasn't confident in the offense and he had to play conservative in order to make sure that they didn't get the big gain or the big opportunity that someone was going to be left wide open. And I did agree with that in the beginning, but then, talking to a few more people, whether that had been on Twitter or through Instagram, he was way too conservative with a defense like this. The reason why Vic Fangio had success with this defense is because he was aggressive, and also he had a great design scheme. And I still believe that the Bears, 2019 would have been a much better year with Vic Fangio, and this year would not have collapsed as bad with Vic Fangio. So I think that the Bears defense today looked fantastic. Pagano called some really good plays. There was some questionable plays, especially that only touchdown that was given up. The wide receiver was wide open in the end zone. But to take away from it, the Bears played very aggressive today. They had a safety. They had 5 sacks, 2 coming from Mario Edwards Jr., Khalil Mack, Brian Nichols, and Roquan Smith. That was another huge sack. And they were in big play opportunities for the Texans to get back into the game or get some momentum. So the Bears defense looked absolutely fantastic today. A+ grade for them. You can't ask for more, especially 2 goal line stands. 2 out of 3 goal line stands is fantastic. The Bears were once at this point earlier in the season were one of the best defensive red zone teams in the entire NFL. And overall, the Bears, you can't ask for a better defensive day like this, but we need that the rest of the season, including our final game against the Green Bay Packers. If the Bears still have an opportunity to make the playoff, it's going to be with their defense shutting down the Green Bay Packers in Week 17. But overall, awesome day shutting down one of the elite quarterbacks in the NFL and, giving them practically no run game, no pass game. Great job by the defense. You've gained the trust of most fans back. But something I really want to hit on is the fact that Robert Quinn still didn't do anything today. He got some pressures, which is fantastic. You're opening up the opportunity for your teammates. But at the end of the day, you had Deshaun Watson wrapped up in your arms at one point in the game. You need to make that sack in order to win some fans back. And I tweeted in the middle of the game, Robert Quinn, if you want to win some Chicago Bears fans back, or your fans overall from all the other teams that you played on, whether they've been the Cowboys or Rams, you need to have a huge game today against a weak Texans offensive line, and he didn't do that today. So another huge opportunity missed for Quinn to win over some fans. I said in the middle of the earlier in the game that he needed to have at least 2 sacks this game and the next game. And unfortunately, that's just not going to happen, especially next week against a strong Minnesota offensive line. Unless Pagano plays the same way, I could see Kirk Cousins struggling against this Bears defensive line. They play exactly how they did this week, next week. But again, Robert Quinn is looking like the biggest bust of this year's offseason across the NFL, not just for the Bears, especially just for the Bears, but overall the NFL. So disappointing day from him, but a huge day from everyone else. Eddie Jackson almost had an interception today as well. I know he's been waiting for that opportunity because, again, Pagano has not been aggressive, but the ball was in his hands, and that's Jackson's fault for dropping it. So overall, Bears defense played great, A+ grade from me. But I want to go back to the offense real fast in regards to the play calling. Bill Lazor did a fantastic job today in mixing it up and making sure that this Texans defense was not like, they're going to run a draw on 3rd and 1, or they're going to do, a quick slants pass. Bill Lazor made a lot of opportunity, a lot of different plays that confused a Texans defense, especially a veteran like J.J. Watt, who's going to be talking to, his teammates and telling them this is what's coming. The Texans look completely confused by this Bears offense today, completely shell-shocked. And, the Bears fans know that feeling of being like, wow, what happened? That's what Houston Texans fans are feeling right now today. And unfortunately, Houston's pretty much out of the playoffs now. J.J. Watt, who has, stuck by this, entire Texans team the whole time, I think he's going to leave the Texans after this year and go to a competitor because he's 31 years old, doesn't have much time left playing at this elite level, and he wants to win a Super Bowl. So it'd be great to see him come to the Bears, but the Bears, unfortunately, now with Robert Quinn, unless they were able to somehow pull off a trade to get Watt, I don't see that happening anytime soon. But going back to Bill Lazor really fast, I think he called a great game today. He really mixed it up with Cordell Patterson, Montgomery in the backfield again. Both of them had fantastic games. And then making Mitch Trubisky look like an all-star again. So I don't know what the deal is going forward with the Chicago Bears, especially looking into next season. But I think that the Bears have a very good opportunity with Bill Lazor. If he's able to tap into Mitchell Trubisky's potential like he is right now, I could see Bill Lazor being one of the lone coaches staying on the Chicago Bears, not as the head coach, but potentially as the offensive coordinator if the Bears were to finish the season strong, especially with the way they've played the last couple games moving forward. So I still think, and the play calling was great in the Detroit game as well. I mean, the Bears scored 30 points. You can't ask much more of that. That's very impressive. Back-to-back weeks with 30 or more points. And Bill Lazor's the guy that's doing it. I don't think Matt Nagy could have done this. It would have been still too complex of an offense, and the Bears players would have been like, this just isn't working for us. But overall, I think that the Bears did a great job with play calling today. Everyone had great games on offense, and, bringing in, kind of like mentioned earlier, Jimmy Graham and Cole Kmet. That's something that I want to hit on in regards to play calling. They're really getting him involved in the last couple games. The rookie from Arlington Heights, it's really great to see a hometown kid doing well on the Bears. He had another big game today. He was bulldozing and bullying over Texans defenders. And that's something that we should look forward to, especially having a mentor in Jimmy Graham and then a young Cole Kmet. So overall, I'm going to give the offense an A, not an A+, because there was no points scored by the offense besides Kyrie Santos in the second half. But again, I think that was to kind of keep the score respectful as the Bears were just kind of, gutting the Texans at this point. So I think that everything went really well. I'm hoping for next week against a much tougher Vikings and another team fighting for that final wild card spot, that they continue to have the offense like this, keeping Cole Kmet and Jimmy Graham involved, and moving forward into another great matchup next week. And I know we say this every single time. but next week is probably the biggest game of the year. We're going to get to that in a little bit, but I want to give one more shout out to the defense. Duke Shelley out of Kansas State, who we drafted last year, he had a great game in moving in for Buster Skrine, and we all know how I feel about Buster Skrine. I think that he's had better playing days on different teams. He's not the same player that he was in New York, in Chicago, and I believe that the Buster Skrine era is over in Chicago, especially after this year. But Duke Shelley played a great game. He was involved in big plays, big stops. He's bigger than Skrine. Overall, I like him a lot. He's younger too. He's on a rookie contract still. So let's have a strong defense for next year. And I think that Duke Shelley earned that nickel corner position. So great job to him today. Shout out to the Kansas State kid. And then finally, kind of like I said before, next week against the Vikings, which we will get way more into it on Wednesday night, is the biggest game of the season for the Chicago Bears. It is going to determine who goes to the playoffs or who will earn that final wild card spot if the opportunity rises for either team. So as we know, the Bears beat the Buccaneers earlier this season. Today, on December 13th, 2020, the Vikings played the Buccaneers, who they lost to. So the Bears having the advantage over the Buccaneers. And then if the Bears were to win next week against the Vikings, they own the tiebreaker for the final wildcard spot if it were to come down to it. So next week is enormous for the Chicago Bears if they want to push forward and, sneak into the playoffs, because anything can happen in the playoffs. When you're in the playoffs, if you're an athlete, you understand that you go to a new level of, ability. Not just saying that the Bears would, but the Bears do have a talented roster in order to make that happen. And if the Bears were to sneak into the playoffs, who knows what can happen, whether they win. Making the playoffs is a big deal in the NFL, and it'll answer a lot of questions about this organization. And it was a tough decision today, too. If the Bears were to lose out, they get a top 10 pick. They go out and get, a strong young quarterback or a great offensive left tackle or any sort of lineman in the first round. But if the Bears are going to go for the playoffs, they need to make sure they win it. So they have to win next week in order to, keep it. It was either go to the playoffs, get a good first round pick, and the Bears, with the win today, are saying we want to go to the playoffs. They need to continue that in order to beat the Vikings, beat the Jaguars, and then beat the Packers to close out the rest of the season on a 4-game winning streak. Is it possible? Absolutely. But the big matchup is going to be the Vikings and the Packers. So with that, we are not going to give predictions for next Sunday's game, but we will talk about that on Wednesday. So stay tuned for Wednesday's podcast about the Chicago Bears. But again, Chicago Bears, you played a great game today. We're very as a fan, we're all very happy to finally get that win feeling after a long 7 weeks, because we did have a bye. We were on a 6-game losing streak, but that included a bye, and it feels good to be winning again. So the Bears are 6-7. They take on the Minnesota Vikings next Sunday in Minnesota. More to come on that moving forward. But for now, we're going to move over to the current team that is playing later tonight, the Chicago Bulls. So the Chicago Bulls lost their preseason opener to the Houston Rockets by almost 20 points, which that's okay. It's preseason. This was the first time this team under Coach Billy Donovan got to really work with each other, and they played an okay game. But for preseason, it was a great game because, you have a new starting point guard now that Chris Dunn has left the Chicago Bulls, and Kobe White, who is young and up and coming, took over point guard spot number 1 and actually had the highest. He had 15 points for the Chicago Bulls. So they lost. I don't know why people are freaking out. Twitter was blowing up like, oh my God, here we go. The Bulls are the Bulls. They're back to being the Bulls. I think that everyone needs to calm down and know that the Bulls have not played basketball for 9 months before that game Friday night. And sure, it was a loss. But again, it's preseason. It's a young team. They wanted to get these guys getting to understand each other outside of practice. And they played very well. I love the way the team played. They were communicating way more than they ever did under Jim Boylan. They were encouraging each other. They were listening to their head coach, and that's key to winning any game. Your head coach is your leader. You need that head coach to lead the team. And that's exactly what happened on Friday night. But the problem is, and it's not a problem, but unfortunately they lost at the end of the day. But again, there's a lot of light at the end of the tunnel for these Chicago Bulls coming up in the future. So please stop freaking out about the Bulls losing their first preseason game after a league that has went through COVID and isn't playing in front of fans. It's way different. So everyone just stop freaking out. But another positive, bright note that I know we hit on Kobe White a little bit. We're going to get into it a little bit more. But for now, we're going to hit on Patrick Williams. This kid, this 19-year-old kid, looked smooth. And he was playing with just passion, and he was calm and composed. He looked really good for a rookie that has never played in the NBA, and this was his first minutes. He scored 12 points, which is pretty good, but he had some really nice pull-up jumpers. He was fast-paced. He played great defense. And again, he was coming off the bench. So if he is going to be a bench player for us while Otto Porter Jr. is on the Bulls this year, which it looks like he is going to stay on the Chicago Bulls, he looked good. A lot of people were comparing his jumper to Kawhi Leonard's, which that's a great comparison, but let's not also get on our high horse about that. It is the first game. So tonight, the Chicago Bulls take on the Houston Rockets again at the United Center. Let's see if there's that same momentum going into the game. Whether they win or lose, let's see how the team continues to gel together and understand each other and kind of work. But again, a lot of hope for Patrick Williams. He looked really good in his first game as a Chicago Bull. So excited to watch tonight's game against the Houston Rockets. And then going back to Kobe White, again, he scored 15 points, but he looked like a leader out there. And what I really like about Kobe White is that on and off the court, he's a young guy too. He's my age. And, he's actually younger than me. And I'm 23. And he is a complete calm and professional about everything on and off the court. When he talks to reporters, he smiles to them. He's engaged in the conversation. He doesn't mumble when he talks. He actually is like, I want to be here. I'm excited to talk to you because I'm excited to talk about the Chicago Bulls. He loves being a Chicago Bull, and that's something that, all Bulls fans should be happy about. It kind of reminds me of Joakim Noah and Derrick Rose, their passion for being a Chicago Bull, and, other, supporting cast like Luol Deng, Carlos Boozer, other guys like that. Ronnie Brewer, Kyle Korver they were there excited to be Bulls, but that passion that Noah and Derrick Rose and Jimmy Butler at the beginning of his time in Chicago all expressed. Kobe White is bringing that back. And even with Jim Boylan, he was doing that. Zach LaVine looks a lot more excited to be a Chicago Bull now. Lauri Markkanen definitely seems more excited to be a Chicago Bull now. But Kobe White, I think, is going to be the leader of this team beside LaVine, not only just being point guard one, but the way he just carries himself and talks about being a Chicago Bull. Something super exciting for fans, something super exciting for the city of Chicago. He just isn't a jerk. And that's something that a lot of these players in the league have. They think they're so much better than everyone else because they're in the NBA. That's awesome. You worked your ass off to get into the NBA. But having a guy like Kobe White who you look like you can sit down with and just, chug a beer, have a good time, that looks like Kobe White. I'm excited when this is all over and to see Kobe White out on the town, maybe, get my opportunity to say something to him, maybe, crack a beer with him or whatever. But I'm very excited for this guy. I liked him the second the Bulls drafted him. And I think that the Bulls have made two really good first-round picks in the last 2 years with Kobe White and Patrick Williams. So with that, and finally, the Bulls look like a team. They don't look like a roster. They look like a team. And that's, again, because they're communicating, they're staying composed, they're supporting each other. When a guy falls, all of them are running up to him and, picking him up and going, you're good, we'll get it next time. The Bulls have that swagger that they had in the early 2010s. And if they can, gel it together, I don't know. I really think that these Bulls have a good shot. I think people are excited about them. I'm hoping that eventually later in the season that they open up the United Center for fans to go, because I know I'm going. Not only because it's sports, but because the Bulls are going to be something excited to talk about this year. And even if they don't make the playoffs, they're definitely going to show a lot of growth compared to last year. And with the free agent class coming up next offseason, I don't know if the Bulls do well and they get that one superstar piece, watch out for the Chicago Bulls in the next 2 years. But really awesome to see the Bulls doing well. Excited for the game tonight. There'll be more on that. But again, I'll be tweeting about it at Chicago Nick. Make sure to hit me with that follow. And I love interacting with everybody. So please just, let's talk sports. Going into the Chicago White Sox now is that James McCann is leaving the Chicago White Sox to go to the New York Mets on a 4-year, $40 million contract. Now, I liked McCann. He was there for the really rough years for the Chicago White Sox, and he was a good catcher. He did what he had to do for this team. He was a good hitter, but he got like anybody else, he got the opportunity to get a big money contract in the MLB. Not sure when you're going to get that opportunity again, and he's locked in for 4 years with the New York Mets. So best of luck to him. I still think the Sox are still favorited to go to the World Series even without him. But James McCann is a very respected player around the White Sox organization. They're definitely going to miss that leadership that he brought and that brotherhood kind of aspect that he brought to the team. So best of luck to you in New York. Would be crazy if the Mets ended up getting really good and it was a Chicago White Sox New York Mets World Series. I don't see that happening this year, but in years to come. But best of luck to James McCann and his future ventures in the MLB. Now, I want to hit really quickly on the Chicago White Sox, or the Chicago Cubs. They've still been super quiet. I kind of posted something about it a couple days ago on Instagram, but the Cubs have still been very quiet this offseason. It's because they have to. They have salary cap restrictions, but they also have a good team. They have a good core. And Jed Hoyer, the new general manager that's taken over from Theo Epstein, or head of baseball operations that's taken over from Theo Epstein, has a decision to make whether he wants to keep the core while they're still young or trade them all away, get young prospects, and try to build a core for a couple of years down the road. It's hard to say. I want to see this core win one more World Series, or at least make it to the World Series one more time, because there's not much time left. Some of these guys, like Rizzo, has to get paid. Baez has to get paid. Contreras has to get paid. They have all-star players that still really need to make some money, and they can't keep them all. I don't see Chris Bryant still being on the roster, maybe this year, but after this year, I don't know how much longer he's going to be on the Cubs roster. But there's just it's hard to say as a Cubs fan what they're going to do. It sucks not seeing them going out and getting like another big name like Yu Darvish, but they're just restricted to the fact that the Cubs are still going to be good next year. I think they're still going to be competitive in the NL Central. I think they have a good shot at winning it, but in the playoffs, the Dodgers are just they're so dominant. And yes, they won the COVID World Series bubble, which again I don't think is as legit as it is. I mean, it's still impressive to win the World Series. I can't say I won the World Series or played in one, but the Dodgers are still just such a tough team to beat. And, you have other teams like the Cardinals showed a lot of promise coming up, which is a division rival. But I think this upcoming season is the last year of, the potential for the Cubs to really make a World Series run unless, Jed Hoyer makes a shock. And this is a shock that I kind of want to see. I kind of want to see John Lester come back. They're still in communications with John Lester. John Lester has been was one of the greatest free agent signings in Chicago sports history, probably number one or number two for the Chicago Cubs, and he has just done a fantastic job gelling this team together, being the leader. He is getting older. He's not the same pitcher that he once was, but he still finds himself in games and was making opportunity for this team. So I hope that the Cubs bring him back, kind of like a John Lackey deal, though, even though Lackey didn't play for the Cubs before as a starting pitcher. They brought John Lackey in and made him a bullpen pitcher, which that's something that the Cubs could use. And I could see them doing the same thing with Lester, especially with his age, but his mind and his experience is so valuable to this roster, and could help some of the younger guys in the bullpen. So hopefully that comes up soon, that the Cubs re-sign him to a contract. They obviously cannot pay him like they have the last couple years, but hopefully Lester is willing to take, a discount for it because he does love being on the Chicago Cubs. Moving forward, talking about the Chicago Blackhawks real fast. I love hockey. Chicago has become a hockey town because of the dynasty that the Chicago Blackhawks were from 2010 to 2015. January 13th cannot come soon enough for hockey in Chicago, whether that be with fans or without fans. If the Bulls don't have fans, I don't think the Blackhawks would end up having fans either. It wouldn't make sense. But the Blackhawks have such a young core. And, they can make some noise. This is kind of like back in 2008, 2009 when they were like, okay, they're right there. They just need a little bit more seasoning on them, and they're good to go. And I think that the Blackhawks making the playoffs last year, even though it was the COVID bubble, and I'm not saying that other sports aren't as important, but, these COVID bubbles aren't as important in regards to actual playoffs because fans, can control a game. The Blackhawks, I think, having that playoff experience to a degree is huge for them, keeping a lot of their young core. And then moving forward, I think they can make some noise and, go after it and make the playoffs again this year, especially with their young head coach and Jeremy Colleton. But I don't know even how I feel about him. I wish the Blackhawks didn't get rid of Quenneville because he, really helped put them over the edge. I think that the Blackhawks do need to go out and get another head coach with that experience, if not bring back Q somehow, which would be awesome. But I'm really excited for the Chicago Blackhawks coming up, and I don't think fans should be too Kane and Taze and Seabrook and Keith are all old now. I think that the young core that they have behind them, you need leaders on a team, and I believe that they're the perfect leaders for it. So I'm excited for the Blackhawks, as everyone else should be. January 13th is coming up. Hopefully we'll hear some more news from them, but stay tuned for more Blackhawks news from us. And then finally, college hoops. Ray will be talking about Illinois in Instagram post coming up, so please stay tuned for there. But tonight, I'm going to quickly hit on Illinois State hoops. Illinois State lost to Ball State 66-82 at Ball State yesterday. It was a bad game. I really can't say much to it, being, a diehard Redbirds hoop fan. Yeah, it's just hard because they've had so much talent over the last couple of years, and all they've been able to do is make the NIT. And something that Illinois State as a college is really missing is that one dominant program, kind of like Wichita State had, is that basketball was their best shot for a while. Football is every other couple years thing for Illinois State Redbirds fans, but they got torched in this basketball game. And when you play out of conference play and you're able to beat teams, that kind of shows something, especially good, well-known teams, that kind of shows something about the opportunity or what's moving forward for, a program. And, the ISU Redbirds getting torched by Ohio State, getting torched by Ball State. There's just not much hope for them right now. Maybe they'll do well. They can make the dance if they win Arch Madness, obviously. But I don't see that right now, especially with how well Bradley's playing. But I just wish they were good at something. And if ISU, when I was a freshman, they were like, we might join the Big Ten. We might join the Big Ten. They've been saying that for a decade now. And until they make that they have that dominance for, a couple years, I don't see Illinois State joining the Big Ten or doing much more. So they got to work on their recruiting. They have to work on a few other things. But I don't see it happening. And overall, I don't think that a lot of Illinois State fans should be looking forward to the next couple of years unless they make a big recruiting splash. But Illinois State really needs to make some more noise. So I know this was a shorter episode today. Still on the high of the Bears beating the Texans, but we're going to close out real fast. So we're going to wrap up this episode of Just Another Year Chicago. Our next episode will be this upcoming Wednesday. Probably posted around 5 p.m., 6 p.m., depending on, how the days go. We're going to be looking out to see if Ray's feeling better. But we're going to be talking about that Minnesota Bears game coming up this weekend, which every Chicago Bears fan should be like, I'm not doing anything next Sunday because it is a playoff game next Sunday. So stay tuned for that. We're really excited about it. Our reactions to the Bulls after their second preseason game, if they look better, what else they might have to work on, and then hopefully some more news from the Blackhawks, Cubs, and White Sox. So till then, please remember to hit that subscribe button to make sure to stay up to all of our content. Make sure to comment your thoughts on all of our different, our takes. We love hearing from you guys. And then remember to tweet me at Chicago Nick if you want to hear more and see how much my mood changes throughout an entire game. So with that, thank you again for listening in. Really appreciate your love and support, and we'll see you guys Wednesday night. Have a good night, Chicago. Thank you again for listening in to Just Another Year Chicago with Nic Roti and Ryan Chapman. We'll see you guys next time.